Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm Rodney Evans, and that is my friend and my co-host and my close collaborator now in so many things, Sam Spurlin.
I was really enjoying that, just like list of accolades. It sounded like you were really gearing up for a long one. I'll take the three things that you went with. Hey, how's it going?
Every week I'm going to add an adjective: Iron Manner, swimmer,
I like
New York State resident, pizza enthusiast.
Yes. So not unequivocally positive things, just
things,
adjectives,
just things I know about you.
Yeah, exactly.
Welcome back to At Work with the Ready. This is a podcast about modernizing organizations as the future of work collides with the present moment.
And this is a special episode within our special miniseries. We're like
Double
two
specials.
levels deep here, Inception podcast land, because we're going to talk about depth finding, but not any one particular part of depth finding, kind of applying depth finding to this moment.
Yeah, to the, some might say, chaos that surrounds us.
Indeed. I would
before
say that.
we do, should we do a check-in?
We should check in, and we should do a check-in that just is a real palate cleanser, completely non-relevant to anything.
That sounds good.
What's a notable wildlife encounter you've had?
Oh, how fun is that? Okay, so I think I've mentioned this on the show, but maybe not. About, I don't know, a long time ago, Jack will cut this part out. Ed and I, before we got married, traveled around the world for a year. Basically, we decided we were going to leave New York, and then we ended up traveling for a long time. And the first country that we went to was Mongolia, because Ed just had like a real bee in his bonnet about wanting to go to Mongolia. I did no research. Anyway, Mongolia, I don't know if this is still true, but when we were there in 2010 was the largest unfenced grassland in the world, which basically means that animals there are like not to be contained. They roam, and when their quote unquote owners want them, they have to go round them up. So we were doing a lot of camping and sleeping in yurts and stuff like that on this trip. One of the first nights, I'm in a tent and I'm sleeping against the wall of the tent, and I wake up to the feeling of something pressed against my face on the other side of the tent, breathing.
Oh.
And at first I was like, I'm going to die. This is it. But then I've been around horses since I was a little kid, and it felt pretty clear to me that it was a horse's muzzle.
Okay.
And it was just a wild horse smushed against my face and sort of just like nuzzling my cheek while I was asleep and making horse breathing sounds. And I unzipped the flap of the tent so that I could see it, and it just sort of like sauntered away. But it was a pretty bizarre and also very sweet way to like start that trip.
That is, it is a combination of both of those things, because I think
it was so big.
Horses are creepy and scary, generally, because they're so big, unpredictable, and I don't know, a horse can just fuck you up. I haven't spent a lot of time around horses. But the way that ended, that's very nice. Like, it's almost like a fairy tale.
Yeah, it was very sweet. I also have mixed feelings about horses. I fractured my skull falling off of one when I was a kid, but I still really love them. Okay. I don't know. It's a whole melange of feelings. What about you? Tell me about your notable wildlife encounter. I'm curious because I have you branded as an inside boy.
Whoa! I like hiking and going outdoors and stuff. Although this story
I like hiking and going
help.
outdoors and stuff. Okay, hit me.
Yeah. Really, this was a check-in question just designed so that I could talk about my now two best friends, which is this bird and the spider who I hang out with every day. So there's a mockingbird that comes and sits on my balcony literally almost every morning. If the weather's good, he'll come hang out. I've named him Lawrence. I talk to him, and like I feel like we have a relationship. And then the new addition to my friend group is this spider who lives in the window right to my right here, right next to my desk. And every night he comes out, builds a web, and I see him all the time. And I've also named him. His name is Wilbur. And it's just I see him every day, and I feel like I have a bond with him.
Sam, I feel like this is the kind of story that people tell when they're in jail.
Yeah, I was talking to my wife about this, and she's like, "You, are you good working from home? Like everything all right?"
Is it time to maybe go to a co-working space like once a week? Just
I'm maybe,
maybe
but I can see now, there's like that cliche is like older folks like getting really into, and dads in particular getting really into birds and like
birds.
birding and like bird
Yeah.
feeders and stuff.
Yeah.
I can see like if you spend a lot of time at home and you become very aware of animal patterns, you can start to build a real bond there. The cool thing about the spider is that I saw it last year before winter, and I just assumed it died over the winter. But now that it's getting warm again, it's back. And do I know 100% sure that it's the same spider?
That
I
was
do
my
not.
question.
Do I
Okay.
choose to decide that it is the same spider? Yes,
It
it is
probably
Wilbur.
is, or maybe it's Wilbur's
Probably,
son or,
maybe.
grandpa. I don't know if they have last names. It doesn't matter. I'm happy that you have company.
Thank you. That's
I
there's
think it's
a lot of pity in
I
that.
think it's nice for you to have somebody to talk to during the Look,
Best
I have 2
friends.
dogs. I understand. You
Yeah,
need to sometimes just have a little interaction with another living
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
exactly.
Our spouses tire of it.
uh, I feel like I'm going to regret that check in. All right. What are we doing today, Rodney?
So, here's what we're gonna do. We are in a unique moment in the United States that probably is pretty obvious to most people who are listening to this show right now. Regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, I think it is undeniable that shit is weird and that unprecedented has now kind of like lost all meaning because we've just been in it for so long. Um, and what I've been finding in conversations with folks out in the world is that using depth finding to clarify sort of like what the fuck is going on has been really useful. And so we're going to talk about this today in terms of what's happening with things like Doge and economic uncertainty and even things like tariffs, because the truth is that there is so much action in the sky and the sunshine zone right now, and that a lot of it is just distraction and zone flooding and basically the wearing down of our ability to attend and respond. And I'm really interested to get into some of the twilight zone solves, particularly for organizations and individuals who are contending with things that are just being thrown at them by the environment unpredictably and really aggressively and at a pace that they've never seen before.
Yeah, yeah, we have this kind of common sky moment that feels worth talking about. There's enough of the folks who are listening to this podcast right now that are experiencing the same things going on in the sky. That yeah, we're not gonna maybe do the COVID era move of 12 episodes on the OS canvas, but I think we can spare one episode using kind of our new thinking to better understand something that I think most of us are experiencing.
Yeah. So, where do you want to start, Sam? Take us into a piece of this.
Yeah. Um the hesitancy in my voice just gives credence to like how chaotic things are. I mean, I guess where my head goes first because it stands out as maybe the most like net new phenomena is Doge. So
Yeah.
Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk and his group of people going into federal agencies and finding, according to them, efficiencies and laying people off, closing entire agencies, installing AI, untested AI systems, just everything in that world
Yeah.
is maybe a decent place to start.
So, I think what's interesting about so much that's happening is there's very little that from a principles perspective is hard to argue with.
Yeah.
Like
We're
if you
we're we're
take
anti
out
bureaucracy, right?
We are pro technology, we are pro progress, we are anti bureaucracy, we are pro efficiency. I mean, the Ready's entire business is predicated on systems thinking and organizations running in a more frictionless way. So,
Yeah.
like, you would think that we would all be squared away here. And yet, I think that where we diverge so radically is both in the sunshine zone and the twilight zone. So what I see Doge doing, which is the same shit that private sector companies do wrong all the
Right.
time, is creating a mandate that's a blunt instrument. So in the private sector, it's we're going to cut 20% of our workforce. In the government right now, it is similarly like we're going to cut all the people that are on probation. We're going to cut this, and the problem with it isn't that there isn't inefficiency. Any government official will tell you that they are also interested in less bureaucracy and less red tape and less sludge to navigate. We have had tons of federal clients, and they're like, absolutely, this is we are not loving this either. We are dealing with 100 years of organizational debt ourselves. Like, the motivation is quite aligned between what I see in federal agencies, what Doge wants, what we would say is right, and yet the way that it's happening is
Yeah.
both inhumane and, more importantly, maybe not more importantly, equally importantly, it's not complexity conscious. They're
Yeah.
doing it in such unthoughtful ways. And I know the playbook, right? The playbook is you cut until somebody screams. This is what Elon Musk does. You cut until you have to add back. He has been very public about the fact that this is his process and this is his algorithm.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge in the federal government is that you're dealing with really antiquated technology. You're dealing with very tenured people who have a lot of institutional knowledge and without whom things just won't run properly. And it's
Yeah.
not so easy to just cut it until somebody screams and add it back because it's not a 20-year-old technology company with a code
Yeah.
base. It's a
Yeah.
100-year-old gigantic, the biggest bureaucracy in the world. And it's not going to adapt the same way.
Right. And this goes to, well, what is the purpose of this organization? You have in industry, you have the benefit of extremely clear, and we would maybe argue at this, but you could say you have a very clear purpose, and like you're here to make money for
Right.
shareholders if you're a public organization. And yes, there are other aspects to that. It's not just that, but you have this incentive structure that is very clear to everyone, and you can use it as kind of guideposts, like how are we doing? And that is one of the things that drives me the most uh, crazy about what is going on in the government is that the government doesn't exist in the same way. It is not there to generate a
Right.
return for shareholders. Uh, except it is in the sense of like taxpayers and the services that we get from it and the services that government exists to provide that the private market will not. And that's part of the reason why we have a government and we pay into it. So I get really squeamish when these kind of private industry algorithms or patterns get just copied and pasted into what is supposed to be our government services.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like the consequences are different, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you cut until something breaks in a private company, possibly it's going to cost you money and possibly it's going to cost you brand currency.
Yeah.
We've seen now what happens when you cut until it breaks in the government, which is like, people don't receive their benefits.
People die
I people die. That's a
potentially.
true,
Yeah.
the estimate based on the USAID cuts is that 3 million people will die this year based on that defunding. Um, I had coffee with a friend in DC a couple of weeks ago who is far more conservative than I am, and she was saying, the cuts that are being made to some of the like intelligence and security organizations are creating probably the largest national security threat we've ever had because
Yeah.
some percentage of those people who have lost their jobs, who were career public servants and are pissed are now going to
Right.
be exceptional targets to become assets for other governments. So
Yeah.
the thing about it that makes no sense to me is the same thing about it that we talk about in private sector all the time, which is, what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
Because if what you're trying to do theoretically is create American exceptionalism, kneecapping scientific research, national security, and the ability for our government to run doesn't feel like the recipe
Yeah.
for an America first agenda.
Right. And you can just look at some of the moves like the probationary move that you were talking about, where basically employees who are probationary in the federal government, many of them were fired. And now it looks like many are being hired back because it was illegal. But the idea, if you aren't familiar with what probationary means in the federal government, it's not like, oh, you're in trouble and now you're on probation. There are two that I'm aware of, two very clear definitions of probationary. You're new to the government, so you just got the job and you're within your first year, or you were just promoted. And
Right.
as you are in that new role for a year, you are considered a probationary employee. So if you think about firing those people, it is people brand new to the government who are ostensibly excited for their new job and are like raring to go, and people
Also,
who have
maybe we're
proven
hired because they have modern skills that were missing previously.
exactly, exactly. Or and people who have done a really good job and have been promoted.
Yeah,
So you have potentially just wiped out some of the most motivated, most relevant folks in these agencies in the name of we just need to cut until somebody screams. And that's like what that
exactly.
makes no sense.
It makes
And
no sense. And what a perfect pattern, right? So if you take the one that you just said to put it through the depth finding lens, in the sky, you have, politicians saying, like, we're going to drain the swamp and we're going to cut expenses and blah, blah, blah. And then in the sunshine zone, you have someone saying, I can't think of a good way to actually cut. So what we're going to do is cut this category of people.
yeah,
To me, that's an arbitrary choice. I have no idea what kind of thought went into that. The Twilight Zone move is no negotiation, just, what we've seen in clients is just like a sweep of those people
just
get
run
their
you run the
letters.
algorithm and whoever falls into the gets
Yeah,
cut.
they
Yeah.
just show up on the list and then they, get their box to move their shit out of the office. What do you think is happening midnight zone wise?
I mean, massive anxiety, massive distraction, massive churn from obviously like probationary folks who are just waiting for the hammer to come down, but also folks who are non probationary and who are working with these folks. Like nobody who is probationary during this time is like operating at their best and just like fully focused on the mission at hand and
Right.
doing their shit. Like, no, like huge distractions and a need to potentially like start looking for another job if you like are reading the writing on the wall. I mean, the midnight zone has just been, I can imagine and have some like firsthand experience with this, absolutely just popping off for people in the federal government over the last 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work with people who had been in the military, and so I still know a lot of folks who are sort of in that world. And I think to your point, Sam, not just around the probationary thing, but just the firings of high profile, very well thought of, for example, military professionals. I think something that I haven't read a lot about yet is just that, when you talk to public servants, a lot of those people had other options. A
Y-
lot of people that go to West Point or go to the Naval Academy, those are people who could go wherever they wanted to go in
yes.
most instances. And a lot of those people are extraordinary in terms of both academics and athletics and they also have like a real public service
Yeah.
patriot motivation. Now,
Yeah.
honestly, I don't have it. I don't get it. I will be the first to say that I
Yeah.
appreciate that there are people who want to go and work for the post
Yeah.
office. I love getting mail. I have never one time considered
Yeah.
becoming a civil
Yeah.
servant in any way. But thank God somebody does, you know? But I
Yeah.
think that like the deal for those people who take less compensation generally, who say no to opportunities that potentially would benefit them in other ways in the private sector, including having more funding and more freedom and more comp and possibly an exit and is the idea that they have more job security, theoretically, better benefits, theoretically, and that they are doing something that is
Yeah.
more important than
Yeah.
making the most money possible.
Yeah.
If you rip that side of the equation out, why the fuck would anybody do it?
Yeah. That's great, great question. Well, and the other thing that comes to mind for me here is that career civil servants, like, these are not political appointees.
Right.
Many people who work for the government for long periods of time work during Democrat
Yes.
administrations, they work during Republican administrations, and it's not about the ideology of it. And yes, there are political appointees in other places, and I get like those switch out with administrations, but there is this like this agreement about what it means to be a civil servant that feels like it has been absolutely just like ripped out for folks for ideology reasons. Yeah.
That is so like wild to me. And
Yeah.
again, I really appreciate that there are people who are like what's happening in the sunshine zone is dangerous. We are going to invent our own twilight zone to keep
Yeah.
this ship afloat even as we are taking on water.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long that lasts, but it I think so much of what you and I talk about and what we talk about at the Ready is creating resilient systems.
Yeah.
Ultimately, resilient systems can adapt. And what we're seeing right now is the creation of incredibly brittle systems. Because if there are agencies right now that are running on the goodwill of people to continue showing up, even as they're being undermined, vilified, abused, having their resources taken, having their funding under threat. If those people are still showing up to do their jobs because of a belief system, that is brittle.
That is finite. That is very brittle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that just doesn't last forever.
Huh. Huh. Where else do we go from here? Like, what else is there around the Doge stuff that feels relevant to talk about? I have one idea, but I'm curious if there's something that you want to dig into more.
I mean, I think it's worth talking about the DEI program
Okay.
elimination.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and yeah. So, what do you when you say that? Like, what sorts of things are you referring to?
So again, I think the pattern that's emerging here is big sky mandates, executive orders, whatever, unclear what is behind them. So there's the sky threat, which is, DEI is over, woke culture is over. That's not a thing in America anymore. There's the Sunshine Zone translation of that, which is that organizations that take federal funding or any kind of partnership are required to dismantle their DEI programs. There's the twilight zone aspect of that, which is the amount of scrambling that's happening. And I have friends who are dealing with this in university settings. I have friends who are dealing with this in government agencies and in the private sector where they are reliant on federal funding for whatever reason. It is a huge distraction. It's a
Huge.
huge distraction from doing work to
Yeah.
figure out how to be compliant with these orders on this deadline. For what purpose? Unclear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And yeah.
again, if the idea is to create American exceptionalism, which I fundamentally don't believe that's the first principle, but
Right.
that's the one that's espoused. If it were, then why the fuck do you have all of these organizations focused on this particular distraction?
Yeah. Yeah. And to come back to the how of all of this and how the how really matters, it'd be one thing. So I could picture this alternate universe where there is this sunshine zone declaration around DEI and then a careful examination of like example of like where DEI stuff needs to be removed. Like there's like a conversation, but no, that's not what's happening. Basically, you've got find and replace algorithms going across websites and going through the various communications of organizations looking for specific words, which sometimes point to DEI work and sometimes are completely different. A very good example that I'm aware of is that the word climate, and this is not even DEI, this is just another thing kind of on the shit list, global warming. So the word climate can refer to like the culture of an organization or can refer to like long-term weather patterns.
Sure.
And or programs that are dealing with like the climate of how teams work and how the military works are having to remove that word because it's getting auto flagged because the administration doesn't want to see stuff about climate change. And like that is just an example of the lack of care and honestly the lack of seriousness. Like if this was
Right.
truly driven by like principles that are deeply held and felt, this would not be okay. But it's not. It's obviously not about that. It's various things that I won't get into, but really based around ideology and pissing
Yeah.
off like the other team.
Right.
That is just yeah. It's like even hard for me to like articulate like how like frustrating I find it.
Because again, if what you were actually looking for, if the design principle was actually high performance and winning, then you would want diversity in teams because the research just unequivocally bears out that they perform better. Now, we've worked in and around lots of DEI leaders in our careers. Many of them have, again, just like the government agencies, many of them have a lot to say about what they would like to be different. There's not a
Yeah.
question of whether how DEI programs are run in a lot of places has room for improvement or is perfect, or whether the smartest people on this subject would make changes. Like they tell us that. And
Yeah.
the answer isn't just to eliminate the programs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it again, I think the thing about this that is taking shape as we talk about it is what's happening in the sunshine zone is causing chaos and it's causing mass distraction. And then the twilight zone is just it's just like truly loco in most organizations right now as they try to respond to funding
Yeah.
cuts, DEI orders, et cetera, et cetera. I think what is interesting that's emerging in this discussion is like the point of the depth finding framework is to understand where there's incoherence or dissonance between the zones. And I think like what's emerging for me is like the biggest dissonance is what what they're saying is in the sky and what is actually in the sky, and that
Right.
relates directly to the midnight zone.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just chuckling to myself because I was gonna say like everything in this situation is creating like incoherence across the
Mhm.
zones. And there's like this cognitive dissonance that I think you're referring to around stated reasons for doing things, but like the actual reasons being unstated, but we're all kind of aware of it, but also it doesn't change the fact that things are happening in the sunshine zone and the midnight zone for everybody. And it's just it is just like this massive complex distraction machine that I think when we are distracted, like globally, like the global we, it is easier to do nefarious things.
Mm.
When
Mhm.
when it's hard to organize pushback or really just organize your own thoughts about what is happening, it's harder to like react to that in a coherent way. And I
Yeah.
think that is like the overarching sort of experience of the last few months for me and for folks who are much closer to it.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think a lot of us, we've had the experience at even at the ready where because Doge has made these specific mandates and cuts around contracting and consulting with the federal government, like we've been impacted in terms of being able to renew projects that were verbally committed, that were going incredibly well, and again, that had the impact of reducing bureaucracy in
Right.
these organizations. But because consulting, capital C consulting, became a target, companies like ours that are a fucking rounding error for most agencies
Yeah.
and actually do the thing that Doge claims it wants to do are being impacted.
Yeah.
It's
What I'm
very
realizing
disconcerting.
totally. Well, and what I'm realizing is that the way, and this is not just me tooting our own horn, although I obviously think we do great work,
But
but the
please do.
way we work with organizations in their twilight zone is that it's very rarely flashy, visible things.
Right.
The twilight zone, if you're not really looking for it, can be quite subtle, and but the impact can be very broad and very felt by the folks who are doing things in a different way. And in this moment of the flashy big move being what is prioritized, I think we are very much kind of swept up in that, and it doesn't look like the stuff that we've been doing for a long time is actually helping. But when we know that it truly is.
Yeah, because we can't hold up the sunshine zone outcome that a booze can, I'm using them as an example, that says, we reduced this many heads out of the organization because we don't draw you a new org chart and then just execute against it. And then, like, what we are actually doing is reducing the amount of time it takes to make a decision, increasing the efficacy of interactions and meetings, using tooling more effectively, like all the things that actually take friction out of a system is our
Right.
job.
Yeah.
And right now, the only thing that is being held up and measured is compliance based sunshine zone shit. Did you
Yeah.
dismantle your DEI program? Check. Did you reduce the workforce by 8%? Check.
Yeah.
Have you gotten rid of the programs that don't favor white men? Check. Like that's it. And because we don't play in that space and we never will,
Yeah.
we are being impacted too.
Yeah.
And I obviously find that frustrating for a million reasons that are, organizational and selfish. But more than that, I just feel like it is a fractal feeling of what everyone is feeling, which is
Yeah.
if you're trying to do what you're saying you're trying to do, this makes no fucking sense.
Yeah. Uh, uh, I guess maybe one other kind of angle to take at this before we wrap for today is actually looking so beyond the federal workforce,
Mhm.
and just looking at what this sky moment is doing to all organizations that need to make plans and kind of have a take on what is going to happen in the future, whether they should invest or not, and when the tariff situation kind of changes. I was going to say day to day, but literally hour to hour.
Yeah,
I have been in multiple conversations with organizations where the uncertainty around things like tariffs have caused them to pause or slow down things that they were intending to do, including working with organizations
sure.
like us. So what have you experienced similar things out in the world? Like, what are the conversations like that you're having about the broader sky for non-federal organizations?
I mean, same,
Yeah.
and it is things like visa programs or, cost of goods and possible supply chain disruptions. And I think the thing that I'm trying to figure out in my own mind is like the flooding of the zone that is the play that's just being run at speed right now, like in the fastest loops ever. It's just like news, 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 constant news. Let's go to war with somebody else every 3 hours. Um, I think that for a lot of organizations, there is a instinct to just stop.
Mm,
There's an instinct to wait and
mhm.
see how it settles. Then even a friend I have who's a political strategist said to me in January, they're just imagine like this administration is just throwing confetti in the air right now. You got to just wait and see where it lands on the floor.
Mhm. What if
I
the
don't
confetti
think it's
never
gonna
stops getting
land.
thrown? What if it never gets
That's the
it's
thing, is I
infinite
don't think
confetti
it's gonna
machine?
stop. And I saw an
Oh,
article, I posted it already with the headline, like, How do we behave in a perma crisis?" It was about HR organizations, but I think it's about all of us. And what we can't do in a perma crisis is freeze,
mhm,
actually.
mhm,
So this is where I think so many orgs, and it sounds like possibly, you're talking to some people who are like, well, we have to wait and see what
yeah,
they decide about tariffs. Or, my friends who are like, we have to wait and see what they decide about our funding or about immigration or about this program. And it's like, I understand that instinct, but I don't think that any of us can operate in a way that's binary for the next 4 years, where it's like
yeah,
either we're acting as if we have stability, which we don't,
right,
or we're waiting to see when the chaos will end, which it won't. And so I
right,
think that we've got to like really third way our way through this as organizations and as individuals. And it's a lot of the stuff that you and I talk about all the time, but it's like, what are the experiments that we can be running to create our own diversity in our organizations, our diversity of clients, our diversity of customers, our diversity of teams, et cetera, so that when we take the hits to one, we have something else to bolster us. I just like right now does not seem like the time where we can put all of our chips on anything,
yeah.
because anything can be eliminated in a week.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here thinking about other sort of Twilight Zone moves, like for example, scenario planning. And I'm actually having this argument in my head in real time about, is scenario planning more or less useful in the midst of chaos? So like on the one hand, when there are lots of scenarios that are possible at any time, it probably behooves us to have done some thinking ahead of time of what those scenarios might be, how we will know when they are happening, and what some of the moves are we want to be ready to take should those scenarios emerge. And on the other hand, I'm thinking when there are nearly infinite or many, many, many scenarios that we have no idea what is more likely than the other, do we just like not waste our time on that and just have a overall kind of posture of readiness? I know I've created a false dichotomy here. There's a third way, if there's one thing we've learned from this podcast. But there's something there that's interesting to me too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that to what I'm trying to do, I'll just like share from my own perspective, and maybe it's helpful to other people who are trying to make these decisions. What I'm trying to do is just watch closely for patterns, because they are there. There are patterns in terms of what gets announced, how long it takes for something to actually happen, how many things that are announced do actually happen, et cetera. And I'm trying to start seeing like and create for myself a mental model of reacting.
Right.
Like, I think that's one thing, and I think that varies industry to industry, but, you saw in January, um, companies reacting on a dime to executive orders that probably should have paused because the news cycle is short and nobody gave a shit a week later, is the truth of it, and because there weren't gonna be resources to actually follow up and monitor and ensure compliance around certain things.
Yeah.
So, um, I'm looking for patterns in terms of what is actually happening in the sky. And then the
Yeah.
other thing is, Sam, I think, you know, we've done work around critical uncertainties in the past at the Ready, and I think right now the critical uncertainty is compounding crises. So the fact is, there could be another pandemic, there could be another world war, there could be another recession. All of these things are in play as possibilities in the short term. Assume that some will happen within
Yeah.
your locus of control. What is the move? And,
Right.
I think I think there are businesses for whom the move is to grow into stability, particularly in the AI space right now, because I think there's going to be a big shedding of a lot of really small players. I think in other places, it's to actually shore up what you have and not try to grow right now and try to just like wait this out for 4 years and wait until the backlash comes. But I think being in the conversation where we assume that this kind of chaos is not coming to an end in any
Right.
near term, the move in chaos is not stasis. You can't just stop because of like we all still have to function and operate companies. So, what is your team or organization's playbook in chaos?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's the work for
Yeah.
companies to be doing right now.
Totally.
And what I'm
Just quick note.
seeing, and then I'll shut the fuck up. But what I'm seeing is we have clients who are experiencing chaos and they're responding with bureaucracy.
Mm.
And that is a really
Like
bad
lock
look.
things down. Things are
Lock
chaotic.
it
Lock
down,
it
make
down.
it perfect, form a
Yeah.
task force, do a study. No, don't do that shit. It
Yeah.
takes too long. You will exhaust your resources and your talent and just create burnout on a never before seen scale. If every time there's a new executive order that impacts your company, you go to the trad playbook of like, let's form a task force and conduct a study. You got to stop doing that
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing or just a thing, but I think what we are potentially experiencing right now are organizational nervous systems and probably human nervous systems that were calibrated in a more normal time.
Yes.
And we are reacting as if we are in a normal time still. And I think we're gonna get through that. And what that means is like we're gonna recalibrate kind of like what it's gonna take to agitate us as people, as organizations, which I don't know that that's a great thing, but I think it does end up kind of creating a new normal. I mean, this is like the shifting of the Overton window, I think does bring
Yeah.
more stability and calmness. I don't know that it's great for the outcomes of the world or organizations, but I think it's going to feel more normal in a year, even if things are objectively just as weird, like, at that time.
I think that's right. And I think one of the things I would tease out of what you said is this is a new normal and we are going to be here for a long time, I think. And one of the luxuries that no one has any longer is to pay attention to shit that doesn't matter.
Mm.
So, you just were recorded talking about RTO. Where was that?
CNBC.
On CNBC, talking about return to office. Bro, now is not the time for anybody to be arguing about return to office. Doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
The data's in, RTO loses, hybrid work is the future, whatever. Regardless of the data or our perspective, it's a huge distraction right now that unless you are a federal employee and you're under mandate and you just have to do that shit, if you're in the private sector and you have the ability to decide, just make a decision and stop talking about it because you don't have the calories to spend right now on stuff like that is basically opinion-based, ego-driven, antiquated ways of working. Just like willfully ignore things like that seemed super important 2 years ago. Just let that shit go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Focus on your
Use the
supply
mental
chain and
cycles.
whether they're gonna get through
Exactly.
a canal.
uh did we just depress everyone and
Yeah, I
ourselves,
hope
or
so.
was this optimistic enough? Was this hopeful uh enough? Or maybe it's not a time for hopefulness.
I think it's very easy right now to be overwhelmed and to feel really burnt out and to exhaust
Yeah.
your adrenal system.
Yeah.
And I think the job to be done is to attend to what actually impacts our systems and matters truly, materially, and presently, and to willfully stop spending energy on the rest of it.
Totally. And those folks who have the interest, the experience, the willpower to propose and steward Twilight Zone things that help
Yes.
your team or your organization or just you and a couple of buddies like make sense and work through the stuff that is outside of your control. I think that just becomes more important. It's more needed than ever.
Do we do it?
We did something.
We did
I
something.
think I think we did it.
All right.
Should we wrap here?
Let's wrap it up. Okay, Sam. Telling the people and reminding ourselves to act with the authority that we have where we're at seems like
Or
the
we
place to
think
wrap
we
this
have.
thing up. Or what?
Or we think we have. Or we're
For
willing to
now.
just take.
Exactly. That seems like the place to wrap it up. Yeah.
Let's do it. So please rate, and review us. That's always super helpful. And if you have a gnarly cross-functional problem or a question about depth finding, please shoot us an email at depthfinding@theready.com.
The music for this mini-series is Yagadang by BG and Coyote Radio. This show is produced by our friend and cellist extraordinaire, Jack Van Amberg, and engineered by Taylor Marvin. Our team at The Ready makes it all happen by helping companies out there solve their biggest challenges so Sam and I can babble about it here with you. Thank you so much for listening.